So let's throw out some hypothetical questions because I really like hypothetical questions. They kind of get my gears turning. So let's start with some deep ones. So let's just say that one person had the ability, whether it's a president or just an individual, had the ability to push a button and save the world. Just hypothetically speaking, I know it's a crazy hypothetical. We'll get more specific with it, but just say that person just had to push a button to save the world. Is there anybody in the world that wouldn't do that? I mean, I guess psychopaths might. If it was that easy, you just have to push this button, believe that pushing this button will save the world maybe, and you have to push that button. Then everybody would do it, right?
I'm pretty sure that there are people who don't consider the world worth saving. It's not necessarily just about psychopathy. It could be about extreme depression or pessimism or negativism.
All right. Well, let's talk about the trolley problem a little bit because I think that kind of helps put perspective. So if you're going down a trolley and you have a choice to turn off in another direction and kill one person, or you choose to do nothing and kill 5 people ahead of you, right? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. Also, my favorite version of that is on the show The Good Place, where there's like a demon in hell who's forced to learn moral philosophy, and as the trolley problem comes up, and he's like drawing something as the like you described it, as the professor explains it, and then the demon, like when it's time for the demon for their input, he says like shows the picture and he says like I think the real problem is like how to kill all 6, and so I've devised like that you have a like from the trolley you have like a lance that like we would get the 6th person on the
takes out the other guy.
Yeah, I hear you. So I'm a big fan of the trolley problem. I was a big fan of The Good Place as well. It was really got me thinking. But it's just such an interesting problem when you're trying to figure out how to value your time, right? So if I spend my time, 1 hour a day trying to save the world, I might save one person. Or if I spend maybe 2 hours a day, maybe I'll save 2 people. Not knowing for sure is part of the problem because you never know exactly what the consequences of your actions might be. But at least it gets you thinking about how much you might be willing to do to save even just yourself, or save your children, or save your friends, your best friends. Because the trolley problem just basically throws out any of these situations. Would you save your one kid over 1 million people? Would you save your one kid over 1 billion people? And at least it lets you try to put a value on things to some extent. And the mathematical mind that I have was always trying to give some kind of value to the efforts that I'm putting into things.
Interesting that you mention it because I have just encountered a video on YouTube about philosophy, about modern philosophy mostly, how it's taught and how it's practiced. And a person was criticizing it, and I think rightfully in many ways, in that it's mostly taught as history of philosophy and not actually teaching people to be philosophers. And that unlike most other fields, it's not clear how you can be a better or worse philosopher, or it's not clarified like what their work is exactly, so what they're working toward, and there's no consensus about anything. And one of the issues was like, so you're solving things like the trolley problem, like by which criteria is it solvable? Is the like so if you like just endlessly pondering it, like there's some value in it, I believe, in philosophy, just pondering things without necessarily understanding where you're going with this, because you can't predict where some things are headed, and sometimes you can discover things that you couldn't even imagine that you should be heading toward if you're just exploring possibilities. With the trolley problem, the problem is when, like you said, in the last examples, when you throw in qualitative differences between the people, not just numerical. Because if it was just a quantitative problem, like if it's exactly the same people by all criteria that matter to you, and there's in one choice is one person dying, and in other choices 5 people dying, then it's clear choice. That the choice then is simple because it should be 5 people, not 1 person. But then like, okay, but what if it's like 5 adult people and 1 baby? And then you're getting, or what if like the baby is your baby and there's like 1,000 people or 100,000 people? Like how that I guess is solvable in a sense, like for every individual person, there will be some calculation that individual person would consider this is the amount of that, or in this particular scenario, it would be this amount of people. But that's not a solution, like in principle. It's not a general solution, or like on which you could be expecting everybody to take action.
take action.
There's the real world problem of a surgeon who basically has a choice to save one life or let that one person die and use the organs to save 10 lives, and that was part of it as well. So this is a real world problem that doctors and surgeons deal with. How much effort do we put into saving this, or should we just write him off and save his organs to save these other people? And these are big decisions that are never easy to make. It's always, but I think in general we try to always push towards the air of giving everyone the freedom to choose. So we would never choose to intentionally kill someone, even if it meant saving 100 other people, theoretically, right?
We
Well,
would
that's the
basically try to
thing.
find a better way.
If that is your solution, or like the solutions to like the surgeon's dilemma are
Yeah.
about which values you choose. It's not about that you have determined which values are better. You've just determined which values you believe more than other values. So if
Yep.
you have something like a very collectivist society, like the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, then the solution based on these values should be to sacrifice one person, whatever that one person thinks about it, to save more people. If you're like, if you do the calculus that like to you all of those people are equivalent, then for you it seems like a mathematical problem. But if you adapt the values of like habeas corpus, meaning that everybody has a right to their own body and make decisions, or that Hippocratic oath that the doctor can never take life, even if they believe it's like for some sort of greater good. So it's like you really make the hard stop at like the individual's life and their right to their own life. Then again, the solution then is clear. You can't sacrifice a person without them expressly consenting, essentially agreeing with the sacrifice, like them making the sacrifice. In that sense, to save other people. So just what I'm trying to say is that the issue with these dilemmas, because that's why they're dilemmas, if you call something dilemma, it's because it's not solvable, is that it's interesting thing to think about. It's not unfortunately it's not a thing that you can scientifically solve in any objective sense of the word.
So let's turn it back. So I just started with that just to kind of get out there, but I want to really focus on time spent versus value from that time in the concept of saving the world. So me and you, we're trying our best with this podcast, with our books, with all of our efforts. We're trying to put in a certain amount of hours and time each week to try to make the world better for us, for our friends, for our families. So that's our reasoning. And so my argument is, for anybody out there in the world, what would be an optimal sacrifice of time or an optimal choice for them to make, to put time into at least learning about saving the world? And, potentially, if this one person could save the world just by spending an hour or two a week, wouldn't it make sense for them to make that choice? And why aren't they? Why aren't more people making the choice to spend a few hours a week? Is because they don't believe, or they just don't know, or they're not, the problem isn't clear enough in their heads to make a decision to spend time on it?
Well, again, I think it's the problem with values, meaning that our society, or most of the democratic Western societies, operate under the like personal choice, meaning that it's up to each individual person to decide for themselves if it's something that they want to devote time to. But then you have different points of view, more like more scientific, more, let's say, if you actually want to calculate it, then you would have to start from, okay, how much work needs to be done? So like start from the end. And then you would know how much hours of work that will require. And then you know how many people you have. So you know like how many hours is it per person if everybody did something, versus how many hours it would be like if a smaller amount of percentage of people were doing something. So of course there's some sort of cutoff beyond which it would be too many hours per person, meaning that like you would know what is the smallest number of people that you would need at maximum effort to achieve the goal. And this would be the sort of scientific approach. The scientific approach exists to inform you of the like how a thing would be doable. It doesn't tell you why or whether anybody should do it. So there's like the whole dimension of ought to, the whole dimension of priorities and values and subjective decisions is completely independent from the material, quantitative, scientific analysis, which is extremely useful because it allows you to do things if you choose. If you decide you want to do them, if you choose to. So those are like a bit of a different questions. Like you can definitely figure out like how much time anybody should, in a sense of like to practically achieve a goal, devote to it. In terms of how much time they should devote to it, in terms of other factors like other values or other points of view, that's where the science doesn't inform you. So then you have to make some sort of philosophical moral argument, which is then, however, something that can be rejected still if you reject its sort of ethical premises or the value system that it is based on, which, again, in a society where people are allowed to choose, anybody can do. So if you have something like saving the world, you can make very obviously powerful arguments like, well, if we don't do something, then everybody will be screwed, including like everybody who will still be alive be screwed. So people who have a realistic expectation of still being alive at a certain point in the future would understand that if something isn't done, then everybody's screwed. I think just the issue is that like a big part of the problems are caused by a small number of people who are controlling a lot of assets. So the the vast majority of people, it wouldn't matter that much. And I've seen recently a video from Kurzgesagt, I think, that what individuals can do, like sort of trying to sort of calculate like how much of an impact individual human beings can have. And it's not that much. Like their conclusion was that during the pandemic, when we stopped traveling and really limited consumption and everything, it dropped, the emissions dropped by like 6%. So that's clearly insufficient, meaning like, so what was the industry or what was the real source of most of what's happening? And it's some kind of industry always. So it would be like a cement industry. So then I guess what the people can do, like it's always something, like what people can do is politically make sure to vote for leadership that will actually make a decision that will change those or will control those industries so that they don't do whatever it is that they're doing that's bad now. Then the issue is, unfortunately, that people don't believe that their votes matter because the sort of leadership elite, which are the wealthiest people and the people who are in the highest levels of governments, they don't seem to care extremely much about what majority of people want, especially in the important countries around the world, like in China or in the United States. So then that's just, for a pessimist, like you have like a all-you-can-eat buffet of reasons why everything's doomed, nothing's going to work, and why no action makes sense. So I think what's most important is, in terms of motivating people, is to offering a way how they can actually make a difference. That's like coming up with that and then introducing that to people, I think is the best thing you can do to make sure that as many people as possible are devoting as much time as possible, because people won't be devoting a lot of time to something that they fundamentally believe is not going to do anything, especially if they're actually accurate, if they're right, if it's accurate sense that it's not going to do much, probably.
Okay, I think I understand. So if you wanted to try to make it something simple, so say you needed to plant 1 trillion trees to save the world, just kind of to throw it down to something very, very basic. We want to survive climate change. We have to plant 1 trillion trees. So if you break that down by 7 billion people, it's not really that many trees. It's only, 100 trees a person would be almost 1 trillion trees, right? So if everybody in the world were just to go out and find somewhere, anywhere nearby, plant, kind of maintain about 100 trees, that could theoretically save the world, or at least put us on a much, much better path than what we are right now, right?
And that's where the science can inform you extremely accurately what that would do. And the problem with that is that's not a full solution. So it would help. And I think this is actually one initiative which is working to some extent, because there are, I've actually funded the planting of several trees myself, because there was this whole initiative on YouTube, like let's plant 1 million trees, or something that some YouTuber did. And there's a company who is seeding trees with drones, so that you can use the advanced technology to make that so that it doesn't have to be a person running into the forest. You just have companies that can be funded by people, and that will then, through automation, will plant as many trees as possible. So this, because it is such a straightforward, simple, traditional, definitely, how to say that, a solution that everybody intuitively understands the full extent of how that will help. and
You can see the
it's
consequence.
clearly not going to have any negative side effects. So it's like as clear cut and simple solution as you can have. And so that's what people are doing and have been doing. I think the initiative worked. They have planted those trees, and though it's just, of course, that the number is still not sufficient to really address anything. And but yes, everybody agrees. Like, yes, let's plant trees. The problem is that eventually, if that works 100%, which this actually might work, I believe like this is a thing that you can easily motivate people to do and can be done. And you can reforest a lot of land. The issue is that if you reforested everything that could be reforested on planet Earth, you still also need to actually primarily solve the industrial production problems.
Okay. So it still wouldn't be enough, you don't think? Even if we reforested all the deserts, it still wouldn't
That's not what
counteract.
I think. I have seen scientific analyses that demonstrate that that's helpful. That's definitely very helpful. But there's not enough room to plant enough trees on planet Earth to offset, especially still accelerating demand for energy. That's you have to
Sure.
calculate with is that the main problem is like the conversion rate between how much energy you get and how much CO2 you release from anything else other than renewables or nuclear. Is the balance is way off, especially if you expect the population to continue growing to something like 10 billion, then you have to in a century or something like that, and then maybe stabilizing at around that number, which is the estimate. Then you can quite clearly calculate like that you couldn't actually, you may not completely run out of fossil fuels by then, but you would have really you have burned such a high percentage of fossil fuels to get there that you would definitely get guaranteed several degrees of additional warming. So the issue, I think, is like the solutions is like you could try to motivate people to invent technologies or to change their lives with the goal of making use of energy more efficient or to be less wasteful, and that will do some several percent. Like these things will do, like during the pandemic. Like okay, it's just 6%, but it's 6%. Like it's something. So if you affect people's wastefulness, or if you increase the efficiency of all energy-based technologies, which you could do like by switching the power grid generation to mostly nuclear power. So if you do something like this, which then again, what you can do in that sense, like you can try to motivate people to make sure that green parties or like environmentalists finally, generally, globally accept that nuclear power is actually the solution, so that the people who are pushing for green solutions are doing something constructive. Because we had elections in Czech Republic just now. I've just voted today, and the Green Party is doing terribly in Czech Republic, whereas in Germany is doing great. Because in Czech Republic, they have been in part of the government several years, several terms in the past, and everything they proposed to help the environment ended up backfiring and damaging the environment. So that's the kind of thing that you can try to motivate people to do something about, because that's possible. You can have green parties that are not crazy or terrible at their job. What they did, like if you've been, are you still a member of the Green Party in Canada?
I am still, I ran for them. It's been about 12 years since I last ran, but I am still an active member, and I like to follow it. But I think I mentioned the Canadian election too. They've lost about half their votes in this a couple weeks ago in the Canadian election, just because their leadership was just all over the place. They lost direction. The Liberal Party had better green policies than the Green Party. In many ways, in my opinion. I actually voted Liberal, so it's a big pendulum switch. Sometimes they just get too extreme and they just lose sight of what's really important, and they're just kind of making noise for the sake of making noise, and they're not actually focused on actions that might actually be realistic and that might matter. They just seem like they're so unrealistic sometimes that they feel like they have to be more environmental than the mainstream parties, so they're trying to be extreme to make noise and be different. But sometimes you don't have to be. Sometimes you just got to get along and focus on the actual solutions that are going to work. So,
so you might appreciate the terrible decisions or suggestions that the Green Party in Czech Republic made over the years. One of the things they did was there was some sort of like to build solar panels, some sort of like subsidies to build solar panels, which ended up being just a giant in Czech culture, you call it tunnel, meaning that the way through which you embezzle money. So the whole thing like didn't actually help anything, except it increased the price of electricity for everybody, so it's pissing everybody off in the country. And usually it was stuff like, for instance, in my town or the town next to my village, there was a sugar factory that they were like, that was employing most of the people from the surrounding area, and there was some shenanigans with the European Union mandating certain like limits, like caps on production for different companies or something. And because it was owned by an international group, they just raised, just cut off and raised all the factories or sugar plants in the Czech Republic, and just completely deleting it. And then they've built solar panels on the like on top of it instead, which don't employ any people. So it's like this sort of like even in principle, because of course, like, what better thing you could have done about solar panels? Maybe subsidizing people to use them in their homes, type thing. That's like maybe way better. And I'm not saying that that didn't happen at all, but like they didn't focus on the obviously, like, again, another thing they can definitely promote to most people that they can do is to try to use renewables like on their own homes if they can. So that's like one of the greatest ideas that you can, and most doable things that you can and subsidize. So that was one fiasco. Another one was that they've suggested that we would be adding rapeseed oil into biofuel, and so everybody started to grow that plant. The problem is that plant is terrible for the environment.
Really?
So that was like really, really backfired, because it's just a terrible. If you like really start like growing that plant that produces that oil en masse in like all over the country, then it just ruins the environment, like the habitats for all kinds of creatures and stuff. It's really terrible. So that was really bad. And then they they like to protect trees in national parks. There was this invasive bug, kurovec is called in Czech. I don't know like what the species is called in Latin or in somewhere else in English. But so it's like a pine tree eating bug essentially. And so they like proposed several measures of like how to fight it, which then resulted in even more of the trees being eaten by that bug. So then like then everybody was like, yeah, maybe like the Czech Green Party is just terrible. Let's not vote for them ever again.
Unintended. Yeah, the law of unintended consequences, right? So we've got to all learn. I just wish all the green parties of the world would kind of band together a little bit more, maybe be a little more realistic in what they're actually trying to achieve. Actually follow the science a little more than just kind of be a little. It just seems like they're always a little too extreme in many ways, and they're not actually, like you said, following the science.